Hello, Zay Automotive Reviews. And today we have the drive review of the new 2021 Porsche 911 Turbo S. And boy oh boy, does it have monster performance. Now 45 years old, every previous generation of the Porsche 911 Turbo has been introduced to a lineup as the only turbocharged model. As the rarefied GT2 that changed midway through the previous 911 generation, and now the new 992 Turbo S. We're testing, introduced before the regular turbo, crowns a range that is entirely turbocharged bar, the incoming GT3 and a GT3 RS. It begs the question whether the Turbo S can make a strong enough case for itself, given the latest Carrera newfound depth of performance, and how much the Turbo S can justify the substantial extra financial outlay. Porsche absolutely knows this, so it puts the hard yards in on the 992 performance jumps by 69 horsepower to 640 horsepower. For both more power than ever before and a larger increase between model generations than ever before. There's a wider track on this one, plus 10 millimeters at the front, 42 millimeters at the rear, a claimed 15% increase in downforce, and more mechanical grip from the tires that are now staggered both in width and in diameter, with 20s at the front and 21s at the rear, just like the GT3 RS. In fact, with Porsche Motorsport, stalwart Frank Stefan Wohlizer now taking the 911's ring from the retired August Egletner, there's also been a subtle shift in the 911 Turbo mission statement. Still the more luxurious and usable high-performance alternative to the more compromising GT3, GT2, and RS models. But now with the needle moved a little more in their direction. On the exterior design, go large or go home. Even since the original 930 911 Turbo or the 1975, the Turbo has boasted wider hips than the regular 911 in order to house the feather rear tires. In the last generation, it picked the large from the available small, medium, and large body shells. But this generation has been simplified to just medium and large. If you need help telling them apart, just look for the black air intakes ahead of the Turbo S monster rear wheels. But even without them, the extra girth will be visually apparent. This is one chunky looking 911. Otherwise being in development of the 991, this is evolutionary step, but it's very effective with crisper lines, detailing, adding extra definition to the classic 911 lines. Like its predecessor, there's active aero, select sports plus mode, and a front splitter extends lower like the stuck out tongue, and the rear wings stick up on struts aping a GT3 this time. This time though, that rear wing also functions as a McLaren-style air brake, increasing drag and helping to slow the car when you brake hard. And boy oh boy does it look spectacular. Interior design is for better and for worse. Just like the exterior, the interior is a mild evolution of the previous 991. So the basics are the same, as well as sorted low set and highly adjustable driving positions, a rising center console, and a clean simple layout that feels solidly built, looks suitably special, if not dramatically more so than a significantly more affordable Carrera. The sports seats are both supportive and comfortable. And the test car that was fluted, the stitching on the seats and door casing subtly and cleverly bring the retro 930 turbo interior up to date. Let's take a look at this is the exterior shots. This is just getting inside the door. And again, that's an exterior shot. Definitely nice. We're going back to the interior. The 911 Turbo S. Like the facelift previous generation, there's a small dial on the steering wheel to select different drive modes. Let's take a look at that small dial. Let's see if we can find a picture of it first. Yep. The small dial on the steering wheel to select the drive modes, and an analog clock as part of the sports chrono pack. But there are significant changes too. The 5-dial layout remains with an analog rev counter, the largest and at the center, but the 2 dials either side are now configurable digital dials. Seven-inch TFT screens, a row of toggle switches, puts driver's functions and switchable stability control suspension modes, etc. closer to hand and your line of sight than ever before. I've seen videos of this particular car beating the McLaren 720S, which is a $400,000 car. Not so good as the replacement of the PDK gear lever with a stumpy. Let's take a look at that. With the stumpy little drive-by-wire switch, as is the case with the all-new PDK-equipped Carreras. No longer can you instinctively knock the lever to the left to select manual modes. Instead, you must look down and press the N button. And neither can you use the lever to change gears. I sometimes pull back on the 991 lever to select second when leaving a tight junction because the shift paddles fixed to the wheel were temporarily upside down. The compact feel of the 997 in the earlier generations that left production more than a decade ago is not only enjoyed by the 718 buyers. And while that's a negative in some respects, the plus is that there's more usable space, with a really quite generous room in the rear for a 2x2, though it's still a perch best reserved for bags and children. Now the engine and performance is definitely boosted. The new Turbo S engine is derived from the 3.0 liter twin turbocharged unit in the Carrera. If extensively developed and increased to a capacity of 3,745 cc, previously it was 3,800 cc. For the 991, the turbocharger continues to feature variable turbine geometry, but there's not symmetrical to ensure the ideal path for gases. And the turbine wheels have increased in size by 5 millimeters to 61 millimeters. A more efficient intercooler system, improved air intakes, help boost power from the 991, 69 horsepower to 640 horsepower, while torque rises from 37 pound-feet to 590 pound-feet, a figure now constantly available between 2,500 and 4,500 RPMs, where before it was on tap for a limited time as an overboost function. With all-wheel drive and the 8-speed auto PDK standard, the 0 to 60 miles per hour is 2.7 seconds. It's 0.2 faster than before, and 0 to 124 comes in a blistering 8.9 seconds. It a full second quicker than the previous model. Quite an accomplishment, given that the car left so rapidly accelerated. The ample 205 horsepower top speed remains the same. Now these are the driving impressions. The point to point here. In just a few miles, you'll know that the new Turbo S remains an effortless daily driver. Even with the car riding on the optional 10mm lower sport suspension and fitted with a sports exhaust, the ride is long distance comfortable. Road noise is pretty subdued, and the engine and transmission flexible and smooth. The Turbo S actually encourages regular and varied use. Put up the pace, and the Turbo S really steps up to the plate. It's worth noting that even the 991 generation wasn't perhaps the grand touring softie is sometimes portrayed. But there's certainly more attitude here. And naturally, the turbo motor is key to the experience. The 3.8 feels more traditional kind of turbocharged experience than the Carrera, because while there is flexibility low down in the rev range and throttle response is prompt, you need 3,500 RPMs on the dial for the turbo to really kick. When they do, you'll be fired down the road with a brutal urgency, with every pop of the PDK gear changes pushing you back in your seat like you pressed the red button on the missile launcher. A Carrera is more linear. A GT3 will rev harder, but the visceral step in power delivery, the muscle in the mid-range, and the way the Turbo S gobbles up the narrow power band gives it an intoxicating and unique thrill, all of his own. Fitted with a sports exhaust, there's also a more industrial, bassier feel to this thunderous engine than the Carrera. Very much a good thing. Select the firmer of the two damper settings, and the body control becomes extremely tight. Too tight. We say for quick back road driving. If no doubt perfect for the track work, instead wind it back to the regular setting, and you'll find a real chug combination of compliance to keep the wheels in touch with the road surface. All the better for all-wheel drive, to claw barely believable traction from it. The new Turbo S can divert up to 369 pound-feet of torque forwards, but it still combines a pretty overt rear bias with gluey traction and monster carbon swimming brakes that, although not feelsome as standard brakes on the Cayman GTS, give this chassis more than enough answers to the huge performance. Point to point, this is a savagely rapid machine. This is also a car that communicates clearly. With its driver, thanks to a satisfying raw and analog feel. When you work it hard, though, the steering doesn't have the feel of the more uncompromising and unfiltered GT models. Perhaps that's not such a surprise, given the Turbo S broader brief. But what's harder to reconcile is the four-wheel steering. Porsche calibrates the system with real dexterity, and other models to the extent that you can forget it. There's all but in the Turbo S is somehow more exaggerated and less natural. I feel like I turned in way too early for the first quick corner and never quite gelled with it in 2 days driving. A slighter slower rate of the response will let you pile in the corners with broader brushes of steering inputs, where the Turbo S requires smaller inputs and a greater number of corrections. Now the price and trim. Now testing the Porsche 911 Turbo S Coupe, which retails for $203,500, but buyers can also specify the Turbo model, which was launched after the S. That brings substantial savings of $170,800. If also a substantial drop in equipment and performance. Though the 572 horsepower and 553 pound-feet is more than adequate, in both cases, a Cabriolet is available, priced at $183,600 for the Turbo drop top and $216,300 for the S. Now it's time for the verdict. A 911 is unlike any other. From a purely selfish perspective, Porsche already has it covered. I would pick one of the Carreras for daily use and a GT model for track days and fun weekends. But that's not to say the Turbo S doesn't succeed in finding a niche in today's lineup, nor succeeds in finding its own distinct flavor. Even with turbocharging now commonplace on lesser models, far more visceral than a Carrera now, with a little more GT model fairy dust, the still fit for kids and daily drivers no matter what the condition, the 911 Turbo S remains a 911 unlike any other. This is A Automotive Reviews. Thanks for watching, thanks for liking, and thanks for subscribing. Have an awesome day. And if no one told you today, I'm telling you that you are fantastic.
If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and subscribe for more interesting videos.